first say thanks to Casey. I'm really happy to have our four very esteemed colleagues here and taking the time out of their day to talk with our faculty. Casey, thank you for setting this up, making this happen. I think this is a real great opportunity for many of our faculty to kind of hear straight from the mouths of the people that are doing it, of what needs to happen for their research. As I mentioned, we are recording this session because we have a number of faculty that were not able to attend, so we're going to save that and be able to pass it on. But at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Casey to allow him to introduce our four guests.
Okay, thank you, Justin. I will let Justin to be the conductor for the whole meeting because he is. This is his program, so all I'm here is trying to introduce my good old friends here. I will do that in the order of beauty over age, so no offense to everybody. Therefore, Professor Wei, and before you sign on, and I was just showing my surprise that you are the first female editor I know simultaneously editing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 journals at the same time. I never seen any editors can do that, let alone a female editors. And let me read this properly, please. And I was corrected a couple of times because the number of journals involved. And Professor Wei, our homegrown Professor Wei here, is the editor-in-chief for International Journal of Mobile Communications. Also is the editor for Electronic Government and International Journal. Number 3 is International Journal of Electronic Finance. Number 4, she is also the associate editors for Expert System with Applications. And the number 5 is she is the associate editor or the editor, because I wasn't sure, is the Journal of Electronic Commerce Research. Okay, really a big full mouthful. Now, she is tremendously prolific, even other than being an editor. I just noticed she just received our Dean's Faculty Achievement Award. And the last year, university asked her to give, excuse me, what's the term for that? The presentation, the career presentation. Justin, help me out. Do you remember? I think Eric just did that one too. That when you become your full professor, and it's more like give to the university. She went through
the rite of passage. Right.
That's it, rite of passage. Okay. So I will cut the introduction short, not because I want to. You have more time to talk to our own faculty. And the second beauty one is Dr. Bill Jackson. And Bill and Mary Jo are they are my really good friends. May not be the oldest friend. I think we know each other for the last 5 years. And they both are the pioneer, if not the leading expert in entrepreneurship area. And Dr. Jackson, Bill is the editor for the Journal of Business and Entrepreneurship. And I think you came from University of Tampa, correct? And you also run a entrepreneurship incubator fund. He was brought in to head the Stetson University, the center of our Prince program, which is our entrepreneurship program. And I even remember today that I think the second year you come in, you told me, you say, Casey, just give me a year to be like William George program. You know, that's what was my baby. He said that just give it a couple of years, we're gonna knock you down. Okay, you may not use the word knock you down, but I think you meant that. But which he did, and so he literally revived our Prince program, and got us so many awards, got so many awards in terms of money for students in entrepreneurship project. And then, of course, he is smarter than He's smarter than anybody else. Decided to leave at the top, and you just retired what 6 months ago from Stetson University with Mary Jo. I think it was 6 months ago, right? Almost 6 months ago. Yeah, you need to turn on your microphone, Bill. Yeah, and
Yeah, I
anyway,
retired at the end of August.
okay, good. So Mary Jo, his beautiful wife, Mary Jo, and you know they are actually, no offense about, and they actually. Did you get your license for the scuba diving, deep sea fishing, or scuba diving? I can't remember which one was it. They were.
Oh, yeah, I'm a dive master, but I've been a dive master for a long time.
Okay, that's it. Okay, good.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. So just want to tell you, and okay, let me move to Dr. Rao Rameshwarau. He is of course, the forever endowed chair from Oklahoma State, and he was came out of school exactly the same time, almost about the same time when we start together. We remember he is the one of the most prolific finance author I know, and he stepped down as the editor for the Financial Practice and Education. Now that's an A journal that which is more of a business corporate finance application. It's coming out of it's the second journal for financial management, which is our major professional finance professional group. And we both taught at the University of Toledo for 4 or 5 years. Then we both later on we met back to Texas Tech University. Then after that I went to the dark side, and he took a chair at Oklahoma State University. And the last article I remember he published, and the reason I mentioned this is he published at the Journal of Business, which is out of the University of Chicago, you all know, and which is the top AAA journal. And but I think that for some reason they decide to out of print. And Casey Chen, which is has a journal called International Journal of Business. So he got to become the Journal of Business nowadays. That brings me to Dr. Chen, Casey Chen, and they always people, just because we have the same first names. Dr. Chen, as I mentioned before you guys come up, is Dr. Chen, literally, we're about the same age, right? But the embarrassing part is we are the same age, but when I was in school, University of Illinois, I was a doctoral student, he was my teacher. So that's kind of embarrassing. And I think he graduated from the top program, Ohio State. And then later on, he moved to Cal State at Fresno for another endowed chair, and that looked like almost previous life, many years ago. And he founded the International Journal of Business, and this is one of the very few journal people is that will take a good article from all disciplines in business. And I don't remember how many articles that we recommend and he accepted for my last 30 years in business, in academics. And he is the most open-minded faculty I can see in terms of research. And the most impressive part is, I never know anybody like that, is he has been a department chairman for the last, 20 years or 15 years?
25.
25 years. Okay, guys. Okay. Now, do you know anybody is capable and willing to be a chairman? You can be a dean, a chairman for 25 years. I mean, just amazing. This is as surprising as Way's achievement. Now, Dr. Chen, and this is the most difficult department too. Your department is Department of what?
Finance and Business Law.
Finance and Business Law. Can you imagine you deal with lawyers and the finance people in the same room? I mean, for 25 years. So I speak too much, guys. I'm so excited to see my old friend at the same time. So, Justin, please take it over.
Casey, good timing. I was about to hit mute on you just for,
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Go ahead.
Again, thank you for being here. We have a couple of just structured questions to start a discussion and then kind of open it up for Q&A or other things that, places y'all just want to go. But I think the first, I'm just going to combine the first two and then maybe give each of you 2 or 3 minutes to discuss and give your feedback on what is your personal editorial policy, and also what are the types of articles that you like the most to see as an editor. And June, we'll start with you.
Oh, okay, thank you. I am currently editor-in-chief of 2 journals, so I'm looking at start with International Journal of Mobile Communications. That journal, it is fully free journal. We have rigorous peer review process. So since it's an international journal, so our board members coming from different countries globally, and I'm looking at mainly will be the 3 criteria I usually use to judge. One would be the high quality, and second, high impact, and number 3 is the most up to date. Okay. So in terms of impact, I'm looking at if the research question, the topic has high impact, if the findings can be generalized, has high impact on academic, theory, practical manager implications. These are the things I'm looking at. For the topic, decent topics I'm looking at in this journal, since IGMC is widely covered from topics such as marketing communications using mobile communication technology, such as mobile business model, mobile office, location management, cybersecurity, cross-cultural comparison, mobile teaching. So we have various topics covered. Technology and mobile business models. So right now I'm looking at the more emphasizing would be using the cutting edge mobile technology in next generation mobile business models and mobile commerce models. And also the combination of mobile applications with other technologies such as cloud computing, Internet of Things, big data analytics, and look at any new theoretical models. So that's the mainly for the IGMC journal. So, and also for the EG journal, I'm looking at mainly because that journal is it's already 17 years, so 17 volumes. So I'm looking at also wide coverage. Mainly look at topics such as transparency, efficiency, effectiveness in the electronic government, also e-voting, e-taxing, electronic government transformation, knowledge management, innovation in intelligent government, ubiquitous city, society, and others. So, but also I'm looking at the combination of different types of information technology applied in the government administration. Okay.
Great, thanks, June. Dr. Rao, would you like to talk with us?
Yes, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this session, Justin, and of course, my dear friend, Casey. I'm not sure that I'm the right person to answer this specific question that you posed, Justin, since I'm no longer editing. And also the Journal of Applied Finance, which was called FPED, Financial Practice and Education. That no longer exists. You might say that it still exists, but it's been folded into Journal of Applied Corporate Finance that I think Don Chu edits. I'm not sure if he's still editing it, but FMA no longer, they pulled the plug on our journal. I'm not sure why. Betty and myself, when we co-edited it, we turned it around, and I thought we did humility aside, I thought we did a pretty good job of turning that journal around, but they decided to, pull the plug on that and then transfer their sponsorship to JACF, which is of course a top a top practitioner journal. What I instead would like to talk about is, I actually prepared a few slides talking about what it takes to successfully, publish, and also maybe talk a little bit about if you get an R&R, what are some of the things that you should be mindful about, all right? But maybe the best thing would be to maybe let the others speak about their journals, and then I can come back and maybe talk about from a different perspective. I serve on the editorial board for a couple of journals, Financial Review and Journal of Financial Research, and also Review of Financial Economics. So I'd like to share some of my perspectives as a editorial board member. That's okay with you guys?
That would be great. Thank you. So we'll come to that in just a few minutes. Dr. Chen, Professor Chen. I was told to call you Professor Chen instead of Casey, so y'all don't get confused.
Good morning from California. Thank you for inviting me. International Journal of Business, we call IJB, has existed for 20 some years now. And we are not a top 8 journal, so therefore we have to be open-minded in terms of the papers that we accept. As the title suggests that it is very broad, so I'm looking for some good quality papers that I think is relevant in content, and also the review process usually takes from 4 to 6 weeks. I usually serve as the first round reviewer, and then if I see the paper having good quality and can proceed further, then I will find a reviewer, 1 or 2 reviewers to review the paper. And oftentimes I like to use the authors cited in the paper as a reviewer, outside reviewer. And then if necessary, I'll use my editorial board member to serve as the final decision maker. We are not the top 8 journals, so therefore we are looking for papers, usually mostly empirical type. And we publish about 6 papers per issue, and we have 4 issues a year. So I have received pretty good stable flow of papers, lots of papers from overseas. So IJB has a pretty good reputation in some countries. As the editor of the journal, you worry about number 1 is the quality of the papers, and number 2 is the flow of the papers. But I think I'm pretty lucky over the last 20 some years that we are able to continue to publish papers. So that's I can say right now. Thank you.
And Dr. Jackson.
I guess I'll begin with a personal philosophy that I've always had. In fact, I think I developed that at a seminar that, if any of you know Jay Barney, who had been the editor of the Journal of Management when he was at Texas A&M, attending a seminar that he presented. And he talked about his number 1 concern in desk reviewing any manuscript coming in was it interesting? And if it couldn't be interesting, really that was almost a wall that you couldn't get through. Improving on quality, a lot of that can be done through revise and resubmit. But if it lacks interest for the readership of who you're publishing for, your audience, then I think that was the first roadblock of any article going through. From a more specific point, and like Ram, I'm a retired editor now, and so glad to be that after numerous years as editor of Journal of Business and Entrepreneurship. We had somewhat of a different philosophy there. One is that we were looking for quantitative or qualitative articles that evoked thought from our readership, thought and discussion from our readership. So certainly we weren't limiting ourselves to quantitative research, but theory building was very important to us. One last philosophy that I had in that area, and being in entrepreneurship and an interdisciplinary journal for that reason, is that we were looking for articles that were just not someone repurposing an article in a specific discipline, even though we love the interdisciplinary approach to entrepreneurship, but one that truly took entrepreneurship into consideration in their article. So those are some general considerations that I had as an editor.
That's great, Dr. Jackson. That actually leads me perfect into the next part of this question. And I'd rather, instead of going to each one of you, I just want to ask this one in whole, and y'all can just take this and jump in whenever you want. But based on your experiences, what would you consider to be maybe the critical do's and don'ts for submitting journal articles for consideration?
So can I speak to that a little bit? Is there any way to share my slides, Justin?
I believe so. I made you a co-host, so you may be able to go to the bottom where it says share screen.
Okay.
And then maybe by clicking on there, you should be able to.
All right. There we go.
There we go.
So let me just speak about a couple of, are you able to see the screen now?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. All right. So just a couple of things I'm going to talk about, in terms of, so as you can see, the title here is Improving the Odds. So one that a lot of people don't think about is, targeting the right journal. We just heard from our esteemed editors here about, what they're looking for when they look at submissions, right? And I noticed the same thing, when I was editing JAF, and also as an editor, editorial board member, or just as a reviewer. One thing that I find that interesting is that a lot of times people that submit don't really do a thorough research in terms of the journal itself. For example, like JAF, and it'd be surprising, how many times I've had to reject a paper simply because the fit wasn't very good. And it should have been fairly obvious if you just thumb through, couple of 2 or 3 issues of a particular journal. It would be very evident what they're interested in. For example, I remember back when I was editing JAF, I got a paper that was a very heavy theory-oriented paper. Sounded interesting, but just wasn't the right place given what we are. We're more applied. JAF is an applied finance journal, so we were trying to address a audience that was both academic as well as practitioner. All right, so it just wasn't the right place. So there were a number of other cases like that where I had to reject the paper, which is kind of unfortunate because if you simply did the homework, maybe you don't have to go through the aggravation of getting a desk reject and wasting time and maybe even money in some instances, right? So I think targeting the right journal is very very important. Couple of other things. Obviously contribution is important, and we've heard the others talk about the importance of contribution. And as a reviewer, that is number one in my mind. All right. And let me just quickly show you a slide taken from an article written by Peter Clarkson. He was a former associate editor of Contemporary Accounting Research, and he went and tabulated all the reasons why Carr rejected papers during his tenure there. And number one is lack of contribution, right? 83% of the papers got rejected because of that, right? And then there are these other reasons. And when I, as a reviewer, I find that it very much mirrors reasons why I end up rejecting a paper, right? So contribution is number one. And I guess one thing I do want to emphasizes that it's not the reviewer's job to try and find what that contribution is, all right? It's the writers, it's the submitters, it's the author's job to make upfront very clear what the contribution is, right? So don't make the reviewer do the hard work of finding out what the contribution is, right? And then I kind of gave some examples here in terms of contribution. So a lot of articles I find that do something like look at the impact of variable X on Y. That's simply not good enough. There was a recent paper that I was reviewing for a journal. They were looking at total factor productivity and its impact on payout policy. Sounds interesting, but the question is, why is it important? Why is it interesting? And the authors simply did not do a good enough job of saying why, right? Other than, hey, nobody's looked at it, right? And that's not a justification for a paper, right? Simply because no one's looked at it. And the other one is, like a lot of, with the availability of international data, we often see papers done on maybe on Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, and they'll say the reason they're looking at this is because nobody's looked at it for country XYZ. And again, that's not sufficient, right? So you've got to be able to, of course, explain very clearly, here's the research that's been done, and then here's the research gap, and this is the gap that we're trying to fill. So I think, to me, those are some of the relevant issues. And then maybe I'll pick on one other thing, and then if you have time, I can talk about some of the other things here. So, it reminds me of Professor Chen, what he mentioned just now, that he often goes to the list of references to identify potential reviewers, all right? And I'm just amazed how a lot of articles that I review, the authors omit related works that were done in the same journal, all right? Because the editors, that's where they're gonna go, right? The easiest way to identify potential reviewers, go through the list of references and see if anybody's published in your journal or in your level of journal. What I find amazing is, I review for Financial Review, and all the references are from JF, JFE, RFS. I don't know why they do that. Well, I think I know why they do that. One is they're trying to imply a signal as to the quality of the paper. But then the issue is, well, if it's really of that level, why are you sending it to Financial Review? It doesn't make any sense, all right? And the other is, like I said, editors often are most comfortable. Well, no, the other related thing is, do you really want your work to be reviewed by somebody at that level? Say, for example, a lot of your references are Eugene Fama. Do you really want your paper to be reviewed by Eugene Fama, right? I'm just surprised. So I think what I would suggest is, when you send an article to say Financial Management or FR or JFR, something of that level, International Review of Financial Analysis, try and see if there are other works in a similar journal, right? Not necessarily the same, in a similar journal quality level, right? And include some of those references. So to me, I think, so those are some bits of wisdom I think I'd like to share with our audience, right? So I'll stop there, and then I guess we can move on, Justin.
That's really great applied feedback. Thank you. Yeah. June, Bill.
Yeah.
Go ahead, June.
Go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Hi. Yeah, I think Professor Rao has a good summary of the suggestions for what should do. I just want to add in two more things here. Number one, I think, because I'm talking about my experience when I receive hundreds of submissions per year. So my review process usually goes with, first I will desk review all the papers. I go through each one, and that's probably about 20%. I will reject right away. So the question would be how to get into this 20% to go into the peer review process. That's kind of tricky sometimes. You know, the writing skills are very important, but also I think it's important to know the personality of the journal. Each journal have its own personality, right? So for example, right now I'm an associate editor of expert system with applications. That journal is an A journal, and it is 178 volumes already. So it has good history of the journal. When I look at submission of the journal, it's more focused on expert system with applications. So it's important to know what's the focus of the journal, what's the interest, what's the quality level of the journal before submit the paper to the journal. That's very important, because some of the peer review process takes maybe at least like 3-4 months. So in some journals, I have submit one journal, it took about more than a year in order to get the first round feedback. So the question would be how to, know about the journal and know the personality of the journal before submit. So it will save time and will have a good targeting, basically easy to target the journal. So usually if I submit the journal, I will look at at least the past year, look at basically what are the papers they're interested in. These empirical studies, they are more interested in, all these simulations, what are the qualitative and quantitative combinations or what. So get a sense and then submit that paper to the journal. So I think that's important for the submission. Second, I want to add into would be the how to look at treat the reviews comments. I have been editor-in-chief of IJMC and EG Journal for more than 10 years. And I see all these review comments, some of them really ugly comments, But if I say reviews are different, our reviews coming from both journals coming from 26 countries. So with all different backgrounds, they're all good academic persons, but people have different knowledge, experts. And so some people even think about when they're persons, they review papers, sometimes may have motions. So how to read these comments in the correct way, I think that's important. So, but keep in mind, what I do is always, if the editor-in-chief gave me the chance to revise, I always take it very seriously and the response one by one-on-one response. So that you can reply. Some of the comments may not be right. The review may only takes about 20 minutes to review the paper, but you spend maybe 1 month to write a paper. So you know the best about your paper. So it's important that you will look at the review comments and the response in the right way, but always respond every comment. So that could add in the chance to be successful. And also keep in mind that editor-in-chief is the person who makes the decision. Right? The reviewers only give recommendations. So that's important because editors will always judge, when maybe one paper said reject, but why the person says reject? I will go details, look at the comment, why it is rejected. Some of the reviewers might only say 3 sentences and reject it. I know that weight of the review is low, so I should look at other comments, other reviewers' comments. Some people say major revisions, and they gave 1-pagers of comments. I know they take it seriously, and they really try to have the review the paper, the authors to review the increase the quality of the paper. So editors have their own judgment. Usually that's also, we are the quality keeper. I'm trying to increase the quality of the journal. That's very important. So we take the review process seriously, and also authors need to take the review comments seriously. I even see some reviewers, the review response, they could write 20 pages trying to give their, say, hey, I think we're right. They're trying to justify why it is right. So I think that that's important. So I just want to give my 2 cents.
Well, to piggyback on what Ram and I said earlier, and it's very true when I would do a desk review, is that author taking the time to know what else is out there. And so one of the first things that I would always do after reading it is go directly to their references, and our articles in our own journal and similar journals, have they been fully explored? And I can't tell you how many times that I've received an entrepreneurship article that had 0 references to an entrepreneurship journal. And that's a quick sign for me as reviewing it at my desk. This person doesn't have an understanding of entrepreneurship. And so that's one thing. The one other thing that I would add is, and this again is piggybacking on what Ram said, the editor and the reviewer should not have to search and figure out what is the wow factor of this article. Why is it important? It should be very clear to all of those readers the intent of that article.
Like other editors mentioned that when I look at the paper for the first time, I usually look for several things. One, of course, motivation, and number 2, data, because most paper published in my journal are empirical ones. So I look at the data, the quality of the data, and especially when the data is outdated, usually that's a no-no. And also I look at whether the methodology is sound, especially whether they do the check the robustness of empirical test. And finally, the references. To me, that is very important. Oftentimes, I found authors failed to cite all the papers mentioned in the paper in the reference sections. So if there is an omission of the references, usually that will turn me off.
That's great. Thank you. I know, Dr. Rao, you have a few other things that you're welcome to share with your presentation, or if you'd like to answer questions first. Which would you prefer?
If I can just show one more slide.
That'd be great.
Okay. So it actually piggybacks on what Dr. Jun Wei said, right? Okay. So so it's about, how to handle reviewer comments. And just like Dr. Wei said, a couple of things. One is, you should try and answer each and every point as best as you can. And basically, I think the idea here is that you want to take every review very seriously, all right? Even the ones that resulted in rejection of your paper, all right? And I can't tell you how important this is. It reminds me of a paper that I had with a colleague of mine, Bill Maxwell, and we sent it initially to JFE, and the paper got rejected there. All right, and so but what we did was we looked at the review carefully and addressed as many of the points as we could that we thought were valid, right? And then we sent it to Journal of Finance. This was early, I think it was like 2001 or something, or 2002. And we sent it to JF, and it turns out that the reviewer for JF was the same reviewer that reviewed for JFE. And what's interesting is he went through the review, he read the paper, reviewed it, and about halfway through writing the review, he realized that, hey, I've seen this paper before, all right? It looks familiar. So he went back to his file drawer and looked at what he reviewed for JFE. And sure enough, it was our paper. But what he said was, I could not recognize the paper because it's very different than what they sent to JFE. because, and the reason it was different is we took his review seriously. Even though we got rejected at JFE, we took it very seriously and did almost everything he asked us to do. But the end result was the paper was different than what we had sent to JFE. So, so he was now more positively predisposed to us, all right? And so I think that's an important lesson to learn. But even apart from that, right? Even apart from, you know, the chance that it'll be reviewed by the same guy or the same reviewer, the point is, you know, if we take these reviews seriously, you know, it's going to improve the paper so that when you turn around and send it to another journal, it's much more likely to get a revise and resubmit, right? So that's why I think it's important to take all of these reviews seriously. The other thing is, and I think Dr. Wei mentioned this as well, it's okay to disagree with a comment because you know the paper best, as you've said, right? And so you can legitimately disagree with some of the comments, and that's fine, all right? So as long as you're convincing, you know, I don't think any reviewer expects that you'll be able to answer 100% of their questions, all right? So, so I think that's another thing to keep in mind. But the one thing you don't want to do is give excuses on why you can't do something, all right? And also be honest, right? Be honest. If so, for example, I did a review either late last year or early this year, and it had something to do with, I forget the exact topic, but it had something to do with institutional ownership and maybe cash holdings or something like that, right? And rather than using institutional holdings as their proxy, as their variable, they used you know, stock turnover, right? And so I came back and said, as one of my comments on the review, hey, you know, you should really use institutional ownership, all right? Turnover may be an okay measure, but there are a lot of problems with it, right? And institutional ownership data is very, it's easily accessible and available these days. And so they came back and responded why institutional ownership, they kind of dilly-dallied around it. And basically referred to some papers from the 80s that used turnover as a proxy for institutional ownership. And they quoted some really big names, you know, from the 80s. And so I came back and I said, it doesn't make any sense why you're not using institutional ownership. It's so widely available now. And I said, just be honest, because I kind of sense that the reason they're not using institutional ownership is because they probably don't have the data, right? Even though it's widely available, it's not free, right? So the 13F data is you know, for some schools, it's too expensive. They don't have it. And so I came back and I said, just be honest. If this is the reason why you're not able to use this variable, just be upfront. You know, reviewers like us, we're reasonable. You know, we're human. We understand that, you know, sometimes some of the stuff is expensive. So they came back on the, I guess the second round or third round and said, yes, you're right. That was the reason we didn't use this variable because it's too expensive to procure. And I said, fine, you know, just mention in your article that that because of data limitations, you're not able to use this variable, but and then sort of talk about the limitation of using the proxy that you did use, right? So I think honesty is very important, right? And I guess one more comment I'll make is that, you know, reviewer asks, let's say 15 comments, makes 15 comments. Not even if you address all the 15 comments, not all of those 15 comments have to find their way into the paper itself, all right? So, because if you do that, your paper is going to become really unwieldy, maybe even lose focus, and actually result in a rejection in that second round, right? So a lot of times it's okay to address the comment, but make it part of your report to the reviewer rather than part of the paper itself, right? So last year I was working with a couple of doctoral students on a revision, and out of the 10 comments that the reviewer made, I only put in 2 of them in the paper itself. The other 8 were addressed in the report. So well, these are former doctoral students. And so one of them came back and said, aren't they going to get upset? I said, why? You know, we're addressing all the comments And a lot of those comments, you know, they don't necessarily improve the paper itself. But instead, if you're going to put that all in the paper is going to go from 20 pages to 35 pages. And I really don't want to do that. So I think it's okay. You don't have to really put every revision in the revised paper. So I'll stop with that.
That's great, Dr. Rao. Thank you for putting those slides together as well. I want to respect everybody's time, and y'all been here, and I want to open it up to give a chance for a little bit of Q&A. And Casey messaged me with at least one question, so I'll let Casey start us off, and I know Steve just raised his hand, so y'all just go ahead, and we'll start with Casey.
We are. It's important. I think I talked to a lot of our faculty. I think we do a lot of case study just for the nature of our teaching, and also we emphasize a lot of, we are very much important. Teaching is very important to us. So I'm asking is, I don't know whether the trend is moving away from that. Your journals interested in publishing case study, especially entrepreneurship journals, and shorter paper, and probably at least 10 pages. And also, what's the word I'm looking for? Is that you show the teaching?
Pedagogical.
Yeah, yes. What do you think about the publication like that? Anyone? That's my quick question. Go ahead.
Well, since you mentioned the entrepreneurship area, one of the things that we did was actually put a section in the journal where we would publish a case per issue. And we were reluctant for several years to do that, especially based on the position that AACSB held, where in reality, they were not giving authors the same credit for writing a case as they were for a regular journal article. And, you know, and I would say that the work involved in doing a good case and doing it with a strong research emphasis within the case, and especially in the teaching note, is to me just as valuable. And that's why we now include in the JBE a section on cases. So I think that trend will increase. I doubt it, but fortunately, there are journals, Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice, for example, which is one of the most recognized journals in the field, is doing the same thing, having a case. And so I hope we see more of that, but I wouldn't count on it with still with AACSB.
I have a couple of, let's say, somewhat more specific questions. One for Professor Chen, and that is, if you say you look for empirical work, what about qualitative data?
Well, it depends on, yes, in other disciplines, probably we'll see those kind of empirical papers. Yeah, I look into that as well. We are pretty open because my journal covers so many different topics, different disciplines. Yes, we'll take a look at that.
The other question is for my colleague, Dr. Wei, a more specific question, and that is, would your journal examine something like technology transfer from defense to civilian use, for example?
Yes, we are interested in that kind of topic.
I say this in part because communications technology that I used when I was in the military 45 years ago is now on your iPhone. But in a very different format. Finally, a comment on Dr. Rao's slides. I think most authors would like to have a copy of those slides as a checklist. I think it was a very thorough job, and really appreciate that. The other thing is something that I and my co-authors do when we're submitting the report to reviewers is when we've made a change in the article, we put it in, highlighted in yellow in the report to the reviewer. So that we address every single comment they make, we address it. And if we made a change in the article, we put the change right there. So that it is, they said, add this, okay, here's what we added. They said, address this, here's where we addressed it, and so on. And that seems to work fairly well. Again, just addressing it line by line.
I think that's a good point. I'm happy to share my slides. What I can do is I can email them to Justin as well as Casey, Ma. And yeah, whatever we can do to make the reviewer's job easier, I think that would certainly help the process, right? And I think, Stephen, that's what you're suggesting when you're saying highlighting the changes and and where they are, where the changes are in the revised paper, right? So I think that's a good piece of advice to share with all.
Also, how well are you doing at finding reviewers that are responsive? It's to all the editors. Because I hear a number of journals that struggle with getting reviewers, that both enough reviewers and reviewers that answer in a timely fashion.
I may able to answer that question a little bit better. This is one of the things I was trying to emphasize to younger authors is the realistic part of the getting accepted is find the good co-author with, I mean politically, and because oftentimes editors will value the history and credibility of your bigger name co-authors. And also we got, the best reviewer is the reviewer that the editor find it privately, rather than go to your references directly. I always got, you wish that the editor will pick up the email or pick up the call and email some people, say, would you look it over this paper? Because right away, you can see the emphasis, okay? And for example, sometimes editor will send you an email, ask you to suggest some of the referees, okay? And these are all very good things. The idea is just try to get the paper, into the friendly hands. So I welcome the idea is that, and I've been editor for many years too. So usually I will review the papers myself, and so I can have a speedy turnaround for the authors. And usually that's a tremendous positive bias. Okay, good. That's my 2 cents. Go ahead.
Dr. Trent, I think you're muted.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi. Again, thank you very much for this opportunity. We still have only 4 minutes for this, so I'm very quick here. And you are the editors, and you as the wholesaler, and we are as the production, the letter firm. But any editors, any journal, do you think that usually you receive the products from the faculty, but have you ever looked at the product from students? I mean, that students, that means they're very fresh, they have no experience, they have nothing. But the key thing is the UWF right now, we really need the journal like this for the student. Any project, if they can record it as a journal for UWF, and the audience is for UWF. If Dr. Wei you have any idea about this? Your vision that will be the journal for UWF for all the students. That's what I question.
That's a good comment. You're talking about students, for example, undergraduate student and graduate student, when they write papers, how would we give them the opportunity to have these papers published, right?
Yeah.
I know the University of West, for example, give example of University of Florida, because my daughter studied the bachelor degree there in accounting. And they have a journal published by University of Florida. It's undergraduate research journal. So it targets for students who are the undergraduate students. They do the research. They want people to publish the journal. They have their own journal for the university. So I have worked with some undergraduate and graduate students. We are targeted for paper published in peer-reviewed journal. The high quality journal. I even have students publishing in a journal work with me. So for this type of students, if you want to have high demand, you want to have high quality peer-reviewed journal published there, and my suggestion would be they have to work closely with the faculty, because that really need experience. To know what are the good skills, writing skills. Some students have good idea, have a topic. I have students work in the research project in the paper, in the classroom, research paper, portfolio in the classroom, in the courses. They have good ideas, but the thing is, we need to help them to know how to write. What is the good writing skill in order to have ideas? Good quality paper.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I mean, I have a ending question here in a couple of minutes, but I don't want to cut any other faculty off or anybody else that has something to discuss. I don't see anybody. Well, let me ask a question, and it's a little bit different. We've been talking to you as editors. However, before having you all on, of course, Casey passed on everything, and we all see that you are each, Casey, extremely successful writers, researchers. What comments, because we're going to have pass this on to many faculty, hopefully, and many that are assistant faculty just coming in, trying to establish good practices for research. You as a successful researcher, if you could just nail down maybe one or two things from your perspective that you see as, hey, these are critical. This was something that I did or I do to be productive. What might that be?
I think for me, a lot of my ideas come from just stuff that I read in general business magazines and newspapers. And I think Casey can vouch for that too. Oftentimes, we were back in Toledo, our offices were side by side. And a lot of times we would get ideas based on what we read. Well, we didn't even have internet and all that back then, right? We didn't have Yahoo Finance. And so we would just, stuff that we read on the Wall Street Journal, for example, right? And ideas would come about as a result of that, right? So I think Casey can vouch for that. And, I might read something in Business Week, and I'd that week's issue of Business Week, and I'd often tear that page out, circle something, and say, okay, hey, this is an interesting article. Maybe it was about accounting write-offs, or Casey, for example, has done stuff with on ticker symbols, I think, if I remember right. And if there's like a catchy ticker symbol, what effect that had. So a lot of times the ideas are just from just what we observe, right? So that would be my I guess one bit of advice, right, in terms of generating ideas.
Well, after I left the University of Illinois now 30-some years ago and start teaching at my current university, we do not have the budget to buy the data mentioned by Dr. Rao, like CompuStat or CRISP. Therefore, my research has to change the direction because I don't have the data to do a big project. So therefore, I have to focus on a smaller project, like I focus on the valuation of some individual assets. Like for example, here we look at AT&T's merger with Time Warner. I look at the offer price in the terms of that, and then it end up is they're using the so-called trading volume weighted average pricing model, option pricing model. So so this is a very simple empirical study and also theoretical study as well. We derive the model and then test the merger term. And then I also worked with an undergrad students to help me collect the data, and she was also part of the team on the paper. So that's we help our undergraduate students to publish as well, and going through this route. And also I'm doing a favor to myself. And in addition to that, I also work with the colleagues within the school and also across universities, because that's why I go to conference and we talk to different people like Dr. Ma and other people, and to generate some ideas and have some synergies, because if you work alone, it takes, you spend lots of time working on one paper, but if you can split your time and effort with another colleague, then you're going to see synergies in your publications. So, for me, because, I have a very limited resources at my institution, so that's my approach to continue to publish.
I would add two things is, and it reminds me of the first article that I ever submitted was my first semester as a doctoral student. And one of my professors asked me to work on a paper, and he said, I want you to send it to HR, which at the time was an A+ journal. And of course, I didn't understand quality of journals at that point. I sent it in and I got the reviews back. One was very positive, one was very negative. I could not check my ego to justify that. So I threw that article in the drawer. About 6 months later, the professor said, how's our paper? And I said, oh, we got an R&R. I threw it in the drawer. He said, redo it. And redid it, sent it back to HR, got another R&R. I did the same thing. Checking your ego as an author. If you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably not the smartest person in the room. Take criticism well and understand that reviewers are putting in a lot of work to give you that type of feedback. And the other, and I'll piggyback with KC, is if you're good with working with people, find a good co-author. And oftentimes I'd work with my wife. I'd write 7 pages. She would nail it down to about 3 paragraphs. So know your limitations and how your co-authors can help you.
That's great. Thanks. June, if you'll give us a little bit, and then we'll let Casey close us out.
Yeah, well, actually, I agree. Collaboration is very important, as several people editors already mentioned that. I think find a good person to collaborate with and open the mind, and have more communications more frequently with co-authors. Sometimes I will co-author with people, and then some people might be busy, so trying to be more frequently and more proactive. And also collaborate with, sometimes I think more productive if you could collaborate with people who has senior level, so they know better. They just by reading at this, they know, okay, this paper go to this journal. They know exactly in the field. Usually I would say in my field, for example, at least I would know the maybe 20 journals in my field. What are the A-grade journal? What are the Bs? So at least have an idea. It will really help. So read the papers, top journals in the field, in my major. That really will help to get into that. And review papers, it also help for the self-improvement. When I started start with junior faculty, I start with reviewing for different journals. And when I criticize other people's paper, I will learn how to write good paper. So learn from other people's mistakes. Sometimes it helps. So that will help me really, when I read the paper, review the paper, I review like, 500 a year. So how would I, spend time? So usually I want to read the paper. I know what are the major parts I want to look into. How to write a good abstract. If the person really know how to write abstract, that's the first part, and how to write introduction. 10 pages introduction was the wrong paper. We know that, so we only have, for example, 8,000 words. How could we put 8,000 words for all the sessions, how to allocate sessions, all the things. So, as a references, so now it's 2021, we should at least have some papers from the past 5 years in the references. This is the kind of things, but I know that all the editors, most of the editors know how to, look at the quality of the paper. So these are the learning process, especially for junior faculty, and review other people's paper and have served on the review role. That's really helps.
Thank you.
Great.
Shelby, you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have a question. How much stock do y'all put into the letter to the editor? That's something I find myself stressing over when I, the cover letter for articles. But I never know how well that's weighted in the process when it gets to the editor.
Well, I think that's a good question. You talk about cover letter. I can speak, to be honestly with you, I didn't look at the cover letter.
Okay. All that time I spent stressing. Okay.
The cover letter will not be the part of the paper, really, right?
Yeah.
Patient, so.
Another question I had is how do you feel when somebody asks for an extension? I find like often in the review process, I find that it's collecting data and a handful of other things that can take quite some time. How do you view it if somebody says, I need an extension of whatever, 2 months or something like that?
In general, I give them extension. If they need a couple months extension for the revision, depends on the person, the authors have schedule, they are busy. And also the major revision, they have spent a lot of time to recollect data.
Yeah.
I give them that.
All right, well, yeah, those are my questions. Thanks so much.
Hey, Justin, can I say something? So,
Yeah.
sorry to spend so much time. Oh, Shelby, just amazing you look, He's look like a rock star now. Look at that. You see it? But anyway, I was looking at the people on this forum. Maybe they don't need any advice from us. These are happen to be the top publishers, top publishers, authors on our staff now. If you look around, and I'm talking about the UWF faculty. But since this is going to be a recording, I guess, so someone will. So I'll give my at the risk of sounding like your father, that I would like to give you a more than advice. I think there's no excuse for junior faculty not to do research. You simply have to work hard, either for the tenure clock or you want to go somewhere else. Everybody want to be like Justin, congratulate him. He's one of the youngest, the full professor, just got promoted, this month? Congratulations. This is a perfect example to tell you a very junior young faculty can be so prolific and get so much achievement ahead of everybody else. That's my last word.
Thanks, Casey. Yeah, our Associate Dean, Allie, thank you for being here. And if you had a question or something to comment.
Yeah, kind of to go with Shelby, and thank you, Casey, because I agree with that, and congratulations, Justin. My question is, I was trying to type it in the chat while I was trying to listen, is, is there a better time than another time to put in a manuscript for review? Meaning this, especially at a teaching focused university, regional university, is we may do a lot more writing in the summer or over breaks because we don't get, we get one course release for research, but does it make sense to hold off until like a mid-semester to submit? Or I think you know what I'm asking. Yeah, and I don't know. So I would really appreciate some insight on that.
Well, I'll add, I really don't think so. I think it's a matter of, with ours anyway, it's the queuing process. And sometimes it may result in a delay for the authors on the actual publication date. But I don't think it impacts how it's viewed in the review process.
Great, thank you.
I want to thank all my good friends. Take the time. I'm sorry for others that we can run over time. And Justin, you done a great job. So that's all I say.
All right, Casey gave me permission to go over a few minutes, so I hope y'all if y'all are upset, get mad at him. Thank you for our panelists that came, and Casey, thank y'all for making this happen. I think this is a really informative session, and we really appreciate your time very much.